Hello, everyone, and hello, Chuck.
Hello.
I'm Daniel Rodan Legrain, Quantum Science and Engineering Lead for North America at Qblocks, the sponsor of today's Fireside Chat series, Quantum Builders. This Fireside Chat brings together leading voices shaping the quantum landscape, from foundational science to hardware, national labs, and regional ecosystems. And in previous editions, we've hosted Will Oliver, Bert de Jong, Peter Shore, Steve Girvan, and Gretchen Campbell. And today, I'm truly excited to welcome someone whose work really sits at the intersection of nanoscience, quantum information, national facilities, and long-term US scientific infrastructure. Dr. Charles
Mhm.
Chuck Black, Deputy Associate Laboratory Director for the Energy and Photon Sciences Director at Brookhaven National Lab and Senior Scientist. So Chuck coordinates Brookhaven's research activities in quantum information science, including including directing the Brookhaven-led co-design Center for Quantum Advantage (C2QA), which is one of the U.S. Department of Energy's flagship national quantum information centers. He also leads the NSRC Recapitalization Progress project, which is a major DOE effort to modernize nanoscience infrastructure across six national laboratories. And as I understand it, it's a once in a generation investment in the US scientific capabilities. Before all these leadership roles, Chuck served 9 years as director for the Center of Functional Nanomaterials, where he led interdisciplinary scientific organization that basically supports hundreds, if not thousands, of researchers each year from academia, industry, and national lab. Beyond all the titles, Chuck's own research really spans an impressive range from polymer self-assembly for semiconductor patterning at IBM, all the way to nanoscale materials, superconductivity, and scanning probe techniques, which basically gives him, I think, a really unique perspective on how the field connects end to end and circles back. So, Chuck, it's really an honor to have you with us today.
Danny, thanks so much. And thanks to all of you for inviting me to participate. I'm really looking forward to it. We've been excited at home, getting ready for it in the last couple of days. And I think, one of my standard kind of things I say after I'm introduced these days is that you can really tell when you're getting older because the introductions get longer and longer. So as I was hearing you, as I was hearing you say all the things I've done, I was like, who is that? Um, but along with the getting older and doing so many things, you start to kind of have a little bit of perspective, and that's, I think, a good thing. And you also have a chance when you're hearing someone introduce you, you have a chance to kind of think about, what you learned at each step of the way and how you carry those kind of lessons with you as you move along, and hopefully kind of learn to kind of use the knowledge you've gained as you kind of take on the next thing. So anyway, thank you so much for having me here. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Very excited to unpack the story today. So please, to everyone watching live on YouTube, feel free to drop the questions in the chat, and I will bring them at the end of the conversation. So Chuck, let's get started, and let's start with your own path, and how it pretty much led into building large mission-driven scientific programs. So you've moved from deep experimental science and major national leadership roles, from IBM research to Brookhaven, and from running CFN to leading quantum activities across energy and photon science directorates. So what were those inflection points in your journey?
Yeah, I think, just to kind of summarize your introduction again, I guess I would say, yeah, it's been a great path so far. I started like all of us do. I started my science career in university, kind of learning from a professor and the senior students and postdocs. And for me, that meant studying superconductivity back in the 90s. And from there, I got what for me at the time was really kind of a dream job, which was to go have the chance to work at the TJ Watson Research Center uh, of IBM. And spent my first 10 years there learning many things, including kind of how to practice science as a professional scientist, but also kind of learning about technology, because IBM's a technology company, and at that time, the research division, primarily supported microelectronics technology. So I learned a lot about technology, and had the opportunity after 10 years in IBM to come to Brookhaven to help start up Brookhaven is a lab run for the U.S. Department of Energy. It's one of the 17 national labs. And Brookhaven at the time was starting up what was really an experiment. It was an experiment for the DOE to build kind of a user facility meant to be a resource for everyone, but devoted to nanoscience. This was in the early days of the National Nanotechnology Initiative in the US to try to kind of marshal the forces of government to advance nanoscience. And so it was an exciting time for me. I had a chance to kind of come help be a part of creating something new. And we got to think about, what kind of equipment we would want to have there, what kinds of scientists we would want to have there, which areas to focus on, and really what kind of scientific culture we would want to try to build. And I worked there for 10 years and then had the great fortune to be the director of the CFN for the past 9 years, before just last year transitioning and now kind of directing a different kind of center, the C2QA, as you mentioned, which is one of the 5 DOE operated National Quantum Information Science Research Centers. So it's been a path, right? I've done a few things, and you asked about the inflection points, and there have been many, as all of us have. We're always learning. But as I was thinking about your question and thinking about how I would answer, I guess I thought I would focus on one. I could focus on many if you want, but I'll start by focusing on one, and that
I would
is
love to hear it.
a lesson I took from IBM. So one of the big inflections for me was kind of deciding the time was the time and opportunity for me was to leave IBM, which was a difficult decision, to come to Brookhaven to try to create something new. And I tried to take with me, and I feel like I've been trying to carry it with me ever since, the deep lesson I learned in Yorktown, which was, if you want to do something really impactful, like make a technology, which is kind of what IBM does, you cannot do it like yourself, right? You cannot. And like we're all trained as graduate students in labs, and you have your PhD project, so you're like the army of one. You're doing it. But I was there. It's like, wow, okay. To do something really important, like a technology, you cannot do it yourself. You have to work together. Yorktown was a place with experts of all different kinds. I had my own little area of expertise, but just down the hall from me, there were people expert on things I had no idea about. And it took those people, working together and all doing their part to be successful. So I became such a huge believer in kind of team science that if we want to do the things that need doing, that are so important and so hard and so big, like we have to do things together, and that's what we've tried to create in the CFN, is a place where our scientists want to help others be successful, want to use their talents to help others, so that together we can do things we couldn't do separately, and what we try to do in C2QA as well, because like, we could all be happy doing our little thing and, whatever, writing our papers and things like that. But don't we want more than that? Don't we want, at the end of the day, like when we're sitting on our porch and thinking about what we did, no, we're not going to remember the tiny little paper we wrote. We want to remember I was a part of something. Like, things are different now because of what I did. And so I really can think back and pinpoint my time in IBM when I learned that, because like microelectronics, like that's an unbelievable, challenging, impressive technology that humans have created. And it has taken many people working together to do that. So
So
that
let me
it's
ask you something, Chuck. Um, sorry, I interrupted you,
yeah.
but you said something that really caught my attention here, and I wanted to really ask you: was there a moment when you realized, okay, quantum information science is going to be central here for Brookhaven, and I need to be helping shaping that?
I to give just a little perspective, so in the late, well, I was like 2018, 2019 was when um, the National Quantum Initiative was being discussed in government, and the different parts of the government, including the Department of Energy, was considering kind of what will our contribution be. And I was in the CFN at the time. I was directing CFN, and we were a materials lab. We're a materials lab as a CFN, and we don't have quantum information science experts. And I remember we discussed as a center, some of our scientists were uncomfortable. They were like, should I go take a class on qubits? I don't know what a qubit is. Like, should I be nervous? And what we decided as a center is that no, we shouldn't be nervous. What our government is asking us to do is to think about how we can use our talents, our knowledge, and contribute to this field, to do our part. And we double down that we're a materials lab. We know about materials, and as we talk to people to understand the field, we realize that many advances in quantum information sciences can be had by understanding and improving the materials. And it gave us confidence. And so DOE, decided they wanted to run 5 national centers, and Brookhaven competed and successfully won the chance to lead one of the 5. This was in 2020 during COVID, writing the proposal, and I would say I was an observer for that. I did my part, but I was CFN director, and so CFN contributed to C2QA, but personally for myself, I was CFN director. And it was only in the last year when I guess kind of finally I don't know, the bug kind of got me, and I had the opportunity, and I said, hey, you know what? Like let's do more than just kind of be part of C2QA. Let's try to um, have a bigger role in terms of kind of leading the whole center. So that's kind of been my journey. I guess I say I was kind of been touching my toe into C2QA for many years, and it's only been in the last year that I've had the chance to lead it.
Thank you for sharing that. Let's talk about a little bit more about CFN. I mean, it's a really unique engine for accelerating what the broader community can do. So let me ask you, for people outside the national lab world, what makes a user facility like the CFN uniquely powerful for the quantum community?
Yeah, absolutely. You're asking me to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is the CFN. I love that place. It'll always be a special place for me. And I guess the first thing that many people don't know, but I'm telling you now, is that the U.S. Department of Energy runs many user facilities spread throughout the country. I can't remember how many, 20 some, of different types. We have synchrotrons, we have neutron sources, we have large-scale computing facilities, we have nanoscience user facilities. These are resources for everyone. These are not for only some people. These are meant to be for everyone. It's something that I think our government, that we should be all proud of, that our society and that our government, like, we believe in science so much that we create these things so that all of us can use them. And I personally am, that makes me feel good that I live in a place that has those things. But the CFN is one of them. And so you asked me to talk about what's special about the CFN. The CFN's special, I would say, for a couple of reasons. The easy answer is we've got a lot of really great equipment in CFN. If you think about kind of material science or condensed matter physics or chemistry, the tools that are needed to do those kinds of science, and you think about what things do you need to be successful at that, like the CFN has a really good tool set for doing that. Like a lot of very special instruments, a lot of very special kind of techniques. But that's the easy answer. And that's
It's an important one.
it's an important answer, but it's not sufficient because that, many places have that. But what the CFN has that makes it truly special are the people. The people who are there are professional scientists. They pursue their own research half of their time. And the other half of their time, their job is to help you. To help you. These are professional people. Look, if you want to do some ultra fast optical spectroscopy or something and you have no idea how to do it, at the CFN, we don't just like show you the laser and then say good luck. You're working with someone whose career and whose research relies on doing very special measurements of that type. You're not working with someone who's just starting out. You're working with someone who deeply understands the technique that you want to use. And moreover, and maybe I'll just ask everyone to pause for a second and just consider how special that is, because we talked about it a lot in the CFN. It's a hard job to be a CFN scientist. We need you to do two things. We need you to be the best at what you do. We need you to write papers on your research. We need you to get the invited talks, all the measures that we use for science success. We need you to think, I'm the best at what I do. We need you to do that half the time. The other half of the time, when a beginning student or user knocks on your door and says, hey, I need you to help me with something very basic, you have to set aside that you're the super important scientist and say, you know what, now my job is to help this person. And it requires someone who's interested in both. And I think that makes it a special place because it has ended up nucleating a community of people who are smart, hardworking, all that stuff, but also kind of nice, because we're nice. And I think it really has fostered this spirit of, hey, let's work together. Let's try to do something. You know X, I know Y. Let's work together and do something that neither of us could do on our own. I think that's what really makes it special. Look, I'm not diminishing the good tool set. It's a great tool set. But what really makes it special is the opportunity people have coming to the facilities to work with the people. I'm biased towards the CFN, but what I just said is true across the spectrum of user facilities that the DOE operates.
That's amazing. As an experimentalist myself, I can really see the value in everything you're saying, and say chapeau for what you have achieved. So let me ask you something then, Chuck. If a university group or a startup, for example, is thinking, should we engage with CFN or with BNL? What are the best entry points for them? And what kind of projects tend to benefit the most?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And first, the first thing I'll do is acknowledge something that is absolutely true. It was true for me before I came to Brookhaven. And that is, the labs can be mysterious places and kind of like scary in some ways. Because, many of the labs are located, kind of a little bit remote, and you have to go through a gate to get in sometimes, and you have to fill out some form to get on site. And so we struggle with this because, of course, we're a place where we want everyone to come, and if there are barriers in between, even perceived barriers, that's a challenge. But it really is true what I'm saying. Please remember, everyone, that these are meant to be places for all of us. So the first is kind of a mindset, right? Is to have people truly believe, hey, you know what? Those capabilities and that expertise that resides in those facilities are meant for people like me, because they are, regardless of who you are, regardless of where you come from. These are for you. I should also mention, I don't think I mentioned, they're actually a really good deal too. They're free. Did I mention that?
You did not mention that,
Okay.
but I'm sure many people will be happy to hear that.
Well, you do have to get yourself here, but once you're here, access to the capabilities is free. So we recognize that there are barriers. The scientists in the CFN, as well as the staff, are in the, and again, I'm speaking for CFN, but it's true for all facilities, are in the business of trying to help people through those barriers. We are always careful to say, you don't have to talk to us before you kind of submit your proposal to access the facilities, but we are happy to talk with you. So I would recommend that. I would recommend anyone who has an interest or thinks there might be some capability or expertise residing in a user facility. First thing, check it out. Check out the website, read up on things. But there's no substitute for talking to people. If something looks interesting, or even if you think it might be interesting, the best way is to trade email or talk on the phone with one of the scientists who can help you understand not only is it a good fit for what you want to do, but also kind of to help you navigate the process, because we do recognize that there are barriers.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Chuck. Let me now zoom out a little bit at Brookhaven's role in, so to say, the national quantum ecosystem and the initiatives that you're driving, especially C2QA. So Brookhaven leads C2QA with what I understand is an emphasis on co-design to enable scalable, fault-tolerant quantum systems. How would you describe Brookhaven's positioning in the quantum ecosystem, and what are the top initiatives that you're most excited right now?
Yeah, it's a great question, because it's a really exciting time for Brookhaven and for C2QA, because for those who don't know, the Department of Energy kind of renewed its commitment to the 5 national quantum centers just last fall. And it was announced that C2QA, as well as the other 4 centers, would continue on for another 5 years. It's very exciting.
Congratulations.
And so, yes, we're very excited about it. And Brookhaven continues to be very proud to kind of lead one of the 5 centers. Now, in contrast to C2QA, in contrast to CFN, which is a center wholly residing in Brookhaven Lab, C2QA is a center of a different type, a highly distributed center. C2QA is a collaboration among 28 different national lab, university, and industry partners, primarily centered in the Northeast, but not uniquely. There are partners kind of all over the country. So it's a different kind of center. It's not a user facility, has research-driven goals that we think are critical for getting the knowledge that will be needed to ultimately build scalable, fault-tolerant quantum systems. So maybe I'll just say kind of what those 2 areas of emphasis are for the center.
Please do.
The first emphasis of the center is basically trying to make the components of quantum systems work better. I would say that's the problem we're trying to solve. We are all so impressed with the progress that have been made, that qubits, today work much better than qubits did years ago through the hard work of many people. But I think we would all agree that there are many things that quantum systems could do if qubits worked even better. They're kind of just now getting to the point where they're good enough to start doing some things that are kind of really enticing. But we all need them to work better to achieve our goals. And the first part of our C2K mission is to do that. And we have an emphasis in the center on superconducting qubits, but not exclusively. There are also efforts in diamond qubit systems in the center, as well as neutral atoms. But the primary material science that we're pursuing is related to superconductors and diamond systems. So that's the first part of the center. We can talk more about that in a second in terms of Brookhaven's role. But I just want to also say the second companion part of the center in terms of its research goals relate to trying to develop the knowledge underpinning ultimately the architecture of the quantum system that will allow kind of scalability. And I think we and many people appreciate that ultimately any scalable system is going to have to be some sort of modular architecture, that they're regardless of the platform you're going for, there are physical constraints to kind of how many qubits you can put kind of in a given place. And so there are architecture issues as well as kind of, well, there are issues everywhere related to the architecture, related to the interconnects, to the software, in how would you design a modular system, and what would it take to be able to realize one? So this is the second focus of the center, and as I hope everyone can see, these are both kind of with the goal of scalability, fault tolerance in mind, and the goals are kind of interconnected in some ways, right? Because the demands of the architecture ultimately determine kind of the level of performance of the components, and kind of vice versa. You want to have in mind kind of the limits and capabilities of the components when you're thinking about optimal architectures. So those are the two kind of main elements of our center and what we're trying to achieve.
So let me ask you maybe a little bit of a tricky question here. And when we talk about co-design, and what exactly does that mean operationally? So how do you ensure that collaboration across all of these national labs, universities, and industries stays really aligned with all the real bottlenecks that you've just mentioned? Materials, devices, modularity, software. How does that work in practice?
It's a great question. So as you mentioned, so the word co-design is in our center name. We're the Co-Design Center for Quantum Advantage, C2QA. And I guess I'll give two parts to the answer. You spoke about collaboration, which will be the second part of my answer. So the first part of my answer is that co-design. There are we are trying to take our cues in some ways from the microelectronics industry, which developed kind of a whole kind of formalism of co-design as a tool for kind of developing software and hardware together to achieve kind of performance gains that couldn't be realized by each one working in isolation. So there's a whole kind of formalism about how you do this in terms of kind of the language that is used to allow these kinds of this kind of progress to be made. So we have people in our center who kind of their research is in this field in terms of understanding, if we want to kind of port the formalisms of microelectronics co-design to create a formalism of quantum co-design, what does that look like? And so having those experts kind of in the center, kind of helping us understand, the people who don't understand those things, if you're a material scientist working in C2QA, you may or may not understand about the formalism of co-design, but we have people in our center saying, okay, to make proper connections between people learning about material properties, ultimately to, all the way to the people designing the computer architecture, this is the kind of information we need about the materials. These are the kinds of measurements that we need to know about how the material is performing, because that will be useful in the abstractions that we're creating to kind of have this holistic view of the system. So having those experts is super important to kind of set our North Star, to help guide us in terms of what should the individual people be doing. So that's my first part of the answer, and related to the second. But the second part, I think, is a more practical definition of co-design, which, I think I know I do it, and I'm sure many of us do it. Sometimes we use it as a synonym for collaboration, right? Like co-design. The co might even mean collaboration. I'm not even sure. But sometimes people say co-design, but what they really mean is collaboration. And I think your question is related to, look, you've got 28 institutions. You've got a variety of topical experts. In some ways, kind of we have a highly distributed version of the thing we talked about in the very beginning of IBM Yorktown, right? Like we have all the expertise, but we're very spread out. So how do we manage that? And so I would say, it involves a lot of talking, it involves a lot of relationship building, but it involves also kind of a shared buy-in to the goals we're trying to achieve. C2QA had a set of goals in its first 5 years. One of them was to improve the coherence time of a superconducting qubit by 10x, order of magnitude in 5 years. That was the goal. And that required material scientists to work together with people building transmons, right? Because it required the scientists together to design sets of experiments based on kind of device layouts, and then coupled with kinds of material science measurements they're made to help us tease out, we processed the qubit in this way, and the measurements told us this. What have we learned? And so neither of the two would have been able to do those things separately. And so those are the kinds of things that the center has done, kind of, driven by goals that we kind of mutually agreed to. Hey, we want to try for that. And I know I couldn't do it on my own, and I know you couldn't do it on your own. So let's try and see if we can do it together.
Amazing. Thank you, Chuck. Let me switch gears a little bit and talk about a kind of a big new storyline in the US science, which is the Genesis mission, connecting quantum, AI, and all kind of advanced instruments into basically a unified discovery platform. So from your perspective, what's the opportunity here for quantum, and especially for national labs like Brookhaven?
Yeah, we're super excited about Genesis, and I think all of us are. It's really exciting to have such a big picture vision, like being, presented to us as scientists. And I think the thing that we, and I think many of us, would find super appealing is something that you said, but I'm going to amplify it. And that is, the Genesis mission is to build this thing. I guess we can call it a machine, although we'll talk about it in a second. But it's to build this thing, but it's for science. Like that, I mean, if you're a scientist, you're like, what? Someone's building something for me? Like, that sounds great, right? It's like, and sometimes when I think about it, it reminds me of one of those MC Escher drawings where it's like, we need all this really great science to build something for science. So it's like we're chasing our tail a little bit in a very exciting way. So I think there's a lot of excitement about Genesis, even as we're still all trying to figure out what it means exactly. Um, but we know some of what it means, right? As relates to quantum, the vision is that there will be these hybrid compute systems where, depending on the task, the compute will be done by HPC or quantum or some combination. It's an incredible vision, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done between here and there, including, as relates to C2QA, a lot of the goals that we have for the center in terms of understanding, how do you do modular architectures? Can we make qubits good enough so that error correction, gets fault tolerance? All of these challenges that we've set for ourselves, we see them as, they are pretty foundational to achieving, this Genesis vision in terms of the quantum aspect of it. So I think Genesis is exciting for C2QA because the vision is that we'll have a type of machine that can only be enabled by the types of research challenges we're trying to address. But if you'll give me a little bit of time, I really wouldn't mind giving you kind of a very big picture vision of, if Genesis is successful, like what will it mean? Would that be okay?
That would be beyond okay. I have to say that as a former scientist myself, or as a scientist myself, your excitement is contagious. And I would love to hear as you explain that, what will actually look different for scientists doing R&D day to day in the national lab ecosystem.
Yeah, let me just try to paint a picture that we've been talking about a lot in Brookhaven, and I find it very exciting, and I hope you will too. We're imagining a future where the kinds of ideas being talked about as Genesis kind of has come true, meaning, we have this HPC integrated with quantum. We have these instruments that somehow are connected to the machine so they can be operated, and AI is involved, right? AI is involved. So what does that look like? And the picture that we talk about, if we get this right, is something, when we started talking about Genesis, I made some quip about, well, maybe you can call it a machine, maybe you can't, because I think obviously it'll be a machine, but the way we interface to it, I think we have the opportunity to create something entirely different. Like, I don't think any of us will sit down at Genesis and type into it, or it's not going to be like I'm logging into Genesis. I think it's going to be much more than that. Like, imagine a future where kind of you have engaged with an AI in a way, and you've said, hey, you know what, I'm interested in X scientifically. I'm interested in X, and this is what I'm thinking. And you have that conversation, and then you just kind of leave it. Maybe not unlike a conversation that we have with ourselves, like all of the time. Right now, we're just kind of in our office. We're thinking. We're talking to ourselves. But in this case, we're also talking to kind of whatever you want to call it, and that's all we do. And then kind of things start happening, kind of without our conscious awareness, right? Like the machine kind of, which in Brookhaven we tend to call the exocortex. It's a term coined by a colleague of mine. The idea being that this machine now is kind of an extra layer of your brain. And so it's gone off and do things. They're AI agents doing things. They're reading papers. They might be running simulations. And they come back to you from time to time. And they say, hey, you know what? I've been reading these papers. I remember our conversation. And what do you think about this? They come back to you when it's time for a decision, an important decision. And if we get this right, it's not so different from our brains, right? We you may wake up in the morning and have a thought that you hadn't had. You're like, hey, you know what? I just had a really good idea. That's because your brain was working on it like all night. You're kind of doing stuff up there. So you could imagine something very similar where all of a sudden, you got this thing telling you, hey, you know what? I read all these papers, I ran some simulations, and what do you think? And so this is kind of how we imagine a future could be, and why it could be so powerful for science, because it's not just going to be one more thing we got to do. It's like, oh great, now we got the Genesis. Now I have to answer my email and I have to talk to Genesis. Like, I already have too much to do. It's going to be something like working for you and coming to you when it's time to come to you, when it needs decisions to be made on what to do next. So it's a very fantastical vision, right? It sounds like you might see this in some sci-fi movie or something. But the elements are in place, aren't they? And you can walk around Brookhaven or any national lab. There's an instrument that we're creating in CFN that operates over at the synchrotron at NSLS2, that you talk to it. Like, you talk to the beamline and you're like, hey, move my sample over, by 1 millimeter and take a spectrum, and then it does it. I mean,
Wow,
it's really exciting. And so
that's amazing.
this vision that we have of this exocortex, which is a term coined by my colleague Kevin Yeager here, who runs the CFN now, actually. Um, it's a fantastical vision and it's highly aspirational, but the pieces are here, and it's kind of our opportunity to try to create um, something of that type. And what an opportunity we have as working scientists right now to have the chance to kind of really change the way science is done.
So what would be a first visible win, so to say, that kind of convinces the community that, okay, this is real and this is impactful?
It's a good question. I think, you start to see papers. There was one that came out of Brookhaven just the other day where so it was a theory paper, and some aspect of the theory paper relied on ChatGPT to solve the problem in a way that I don't understand. It probably helped them create some simulation or something. But the point is, these are tools, right? These AI tools, these quantum simulators that are coming, high performance computing, they're all tools of different types. And we're still learning how to use them in a lot of ways, right? Like, when ChatGPT first came around, we all had fun, asking it to write a poem for us, and it's like, wow, that can write a poem, and that's amazing and fun and interesting, and having the tools in our hands now we're starting to see, oh, it can not only write some bad poem, it can actually help me solve, a science problem because I engage with it in this way. And I feel like, AI, this has come so quickly. Uh, um, and with quantum, I don't think we're quite there yet, but we're very close. There are many efforts, including in C2QA, trying to demonstrate on real hardware. It's like, hey, here's a problem, and we were able to solve it with a quantum computer. And so I feel like, I don't know if it's going to be an aha moment where we wake up tomorrow, we're like, oh yes, of course, this all makes sense. It may be kind of just a slow, kind of steady kind of adoption as we're seeing with AI.
We'll see, and I'm definitely excited for what's coming.
Uh,
So, Chuck, let's briefly talk about the people now. A recurring challenge that we keep hearing over and over in quantum is the workforce. And also the pathways, how students, postdocs, and maybe early career scientists can actually plug into national efforts. And what do you think the ecosystem currently needs right now in that regard? Do we need new training models? Do we need new collaboration structures? Or is that something else?
I guess in thinking about this question, I I decided I was going to try to combine it with what I'm expecting your next question to be, which is kind of, what do we really need? Because I see those as kind of the same. My answer is the same.
They are pretty much the same question indeed, and it's a hard question.
It's a hard question, but what I'd like to do is kind of circle back to something that we talked about much earlier. We've kind of been relating what's going on in quantum information science, quantum computing, to kind of what went on in the 20th century with respect to microelectronics. And that was kind of the age I grew up in. It was the age of Moore's law scaling, and it was the age of, just like incredible leaps and bounds in terms of classical computing. Like the pace of innovation was and continues to be just unbelievable. But what was happening at that time, and even earlier, I would say in particular, kind of in the early days of microelectronics, was that if you were in electrical engineering for sure, but if you were in solid state physics, if you were studying any of those disciplines, there was one thing that you wanted to do, and that was go work in microelectronics, do something in microelectronics, because it was so exciting. It was cutting edge, it was hard science, difficult challenges, but amazing progress being made. And let's not discount also great opportunity, like for a career, right? There were jobs, there were exciting, innovative companies to go work for, and so as a result, like the best talent in those fields, like there was one thing that we all wanted to do, and that was go work in microelectronics. And I think that can't be discounted, because it's those people who are going to ultimately make us be successful, right? So we have to create an environment. And by the way, I think we're doing a pretty good job. When I look at my colleagues in C2QA who are training students and postdocs, I mean, those are some highly talented people coming out of those programs. But I would say that's the most important thing that we need, right? We need these future most talented scientists around to want to be working in this field. And why wouldn't they want to be, right? It's super challenging, the science, right? It's unbelievable technology, really. I'll tell you a secret. Like when I was a young student and I was learning quantum mechanics, I was like, I could do all the math problems. And I think I understood that, quantum mechanics, you could see it, like if you were studying atomic physics or things like that. But the idea that we could kind of control and manipulate coherence and start to use it like in a practical way to do computation, like in real solid state systems, like I don't know if I would have believed we would ever be able to do that because of all the challenges of kind of mitigating kind of decoherence. I just never thought it'd be possible, but we can do it now. And so what an exciting time we're in. And we need to make sure that the best that we're producing, like, first of all, have exposure to that, understand that there's opportunities for them to work in this area, to have an impact, and to really be a part of something that really can change everything, right? I was just spouting off about some science fiction future where we're not going to type on our computer anymore. It's just going to kind of come to us in the same way we think of inspiration from our own brains. Like, who wouldn't want to work on something like that? Sounds great.
That I'm actually looking at the question from the audience, and that very much relates to one of them. So, what gives you the most optimism personally about the field for the years to come?
Yeah, I think I don't know. It's probably come through to you in this conversation. Kind of an optimistic person by nature. Um, but I just think that we're living in such an exciting time. Look, we know, what do I want to say? Um, some of you might have heard me say that and been like, oh yeah, exciting is one word for it, right? Because we know that there are lots of things going on in the world. We know that there are lots of unsettling things going on in the world. There are lots of problems in the world that seem very difficult, if not impossible. You know, sometimes you read the newspaper, you're like, what isn't going wrong? Like everything's going wrong. But
Definitely.
but but so many of those problems, if you look at them, you know, they're problems that science can solve. You know, they're really important problems that science can solve. And that is what gives me a lot of optimism and kind of trying to maybe pull together many of the things that we talked about today, which is like, none of us is going to solve it alone, right? Pick your big problem, you know, whatever it is. Um, we're not going to do it on our own. We have to work together, but we've shown that we can work together, and we've shown what great things we can do when we work together. And so I think it's important for all of us to kind of not feel defeated when problems seem really hard and impossible, but to rather say, hey, you know what? Like those are some hard problems, but I'm going to do my part, right? I'm going to do my part, and that's kind of how I feel about quantum, right? Like it's like, really, we're going to make the fault tolerant quantum computer? That seems really hard. Um, it requires big efforts like C2QA. It requires a national quantum initiative. It requires a whole quantum ecosystem. It requires a Q blocks. It requires everything. And it requires us to be a community and work together. So it gives me a lot of optimism. It kind of plays into kind of my love of teams and belief. I mean, you don't have to look far, right? You look around at some of the things that humans have accomplished, you're like, wow, you know, we can do really amazing stuff. So who doesn't want to be a part of that?
This is inspiring, Chuck. I want to be part of that. I think we have time for one more question from the audience. So that one switches gears a little bit. And the question is, how is BNL preparing for an ecosystem that increasingly also integrates sensing, networking, in addition to computation?
You know, one of your other questions, which you had given me in advance, and I didn't touch on yet, so I'm really glad for this question. Is, you know, one of your other questions was, what's one thing about Brookhaven Quantum that you wish people knew but you didn't, but people didn't? Did you know that Brookhaven, together with Stony Brook, has built like a very large quantum communication network on Long Island? We're way out here on Eastern Long Island, but our network now, through a number of repeaters, gets into the city, Manhattan, and gets up to a number of partners there in Manhattan, and even is extending up farther north of New York City. And also, if they haven't done it yet, they're going to be doing it any day, going to be demonstrating kind of a free space transmission of quantum information across Long Island Sound into Connecticut. So we've built this, and it's very exciting. I don't think enough people know about it. So in terms of the question from the audience, so there are some pretty significant, substantial efforts in Brookhaven on quantum communication, and looking forward to working with them to pull together efforts from C2QA with that effort to try to do some new things.
Amazing. Is there anything you would like to touch on that we didn't maybe had a chance to cover on that you would like people to know about, Chuck?
You know, maybe just one more plug for Brookhaven, I guess. The other thing that's true about Brookhaven is that we are home to the last working particle accelerator in the US. It's the relativistic heavy ion collider. You can see it from outer space. If you go on Google Earth and look at the satellite, you'll see a ring. And it's there probing the fundamental properties of the universe. Like how did it all begin? You know, right after the Big Bang, like how did this universe come to be? Kind of some of the most fundamental questions there are. They're in the middle. They're actually just starting up a huge project to add a new ring to RIC, which will accelerate electrons, which will allow new kinds of experiments. The reason why I'm bringing it up is those kinds of problems, like, you know, so you see they've got these enormous detectors which detect the particles that are generated by these collisions of these heavy ions. And these give us clues into the structure of the universe, especially the early universe. Those collisions are purely quantum mechanical events. They are impossible to simulate on classical computers. So some of the drivers for some early demonstrations of where kind of quantum computation can be used to kind of achieve knowledge that can't be had in any other way is in simulating the types of experiments that are done there. So it's another aspect of C2QA and quantum at Brookhaven is that really the types of quantum systems we're trying to build are necessary to understand this very fundamental science that goes on at the lab, enabled by kind of this unique in the US science machine that we have here.
Impressive. Chuck, I think we're coming to the end of this Fireside Chat. So let me thank you so much for your time and also the very clear vision you provided into Brookhaven's role in the national quantum ecosystem, all the way from CFN to co-design through C2QA to even broader national direction with initiatives like the Genesis mission we talked about. At Qblocks, our motto is building quantum together. And I think today's conversation has been a very clear example and a reminder of how essential national labs are in that mission. As a small token of appreciation, we've sent a mug to your office featuring our motto, and we hope you will receive it very soon. For everyone watching live, or for those that missed today's talk live, the recording will be available shortly on the Qblocks YouTube channel and also on Apple Podcasts and Spotify under Quantum Builders, Chuck being one of them, of course. So please stay tuned for more Fireside Chats, and more fantastic ways are also on the way. Chucks, thanks again, and thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks, Danny, very much. I enjoyed it.